Story 1. Just like 10-year car loans, it is a refusal to admit that the financial situation is dire. People cannot afford homes or cars according to historical trends because wages have not kept up with the cost of living. Pushing the problem under the rug will not help. Story 2. This will do nothing in the long term. If a 50-year mortgage exists, it will only delay the market recalculation of the equilibrium price while supply remains unchanged. This is a temporary fix for a larger problem. Story 3. He says he lowered his monthly housing payments. Story 4. With a 30-year fixed mortgage, you are already paying double the price of the house. With a 50-year mortgage, you would pay 3 times as much or more. Story 5. That is great for big companies and terrible for regular people. Story 6. You will have to own your home for at least 20 years before you have enough equity to sell. They want to keep you trapped in debt. 20-year car loans, 100-year mortgages, billion-year contracts with Xenu. What an outrageous racket. Story 7. Monthly payment on a $300,000 mortgage would be less than $200 more per month for a 50-year loan versus a 30-year loan. It is a terrible idea. You are not saving enough each month, and you will pay substantially more in interest over a much longer period. If this country were serious about lowering the cost of homeownership, it would ban foreign and corporate ownership of homes and provide incentives for cities to increase the supply of both single-family homes and multi-unit properties. Story 8. It is social control of the free market. It will make things worse. Home prices are dictated by supply and demand and by how much suffering people are willing to tolerate. Story 9. This will create true debt slaves. Mobility will be zero. You are born into the neighborhood you die in. When that happens, do you think people will care about your roads, parks, or schools? Story 10. The average home buyer purchases a home around age 30. This keeps you locked into working an extra 15 years because Social Security will not cover those payments. This is absolute insanity, and it comes just in time for baby boomer housing to become available as many baby boomers pass away. Story 11. The joke's on them. I won't be alive in 50 years, said almost everyone over 25. Story 12. It is great for the banks and lenders. You will never own the home. It is essentially just renting, but with more steps. Story 13. I feel he can go jump off the Empire State Building and land on a bicycle with no seat. He and every sack of human excrement in a suit who work with him. Republicans do not fucking care about the poor. Here in Georgia, you can't get help for damn near anything, but the state will let a predatory title lending service use you and take your car. Fuck him, fuck greed. Fuck every liar who loves this idea. Story 14. Frankly, lower-income people do everything they can to avoid taking a 30-year mortgage. The average life expectancy is 73 years. Someone would have to buy a house before age 23 to pay it off before they die. What kind of life is that? And what does it do to the economy when houses are never actually paid off? Story 15. It is like walking into a car dealership where they refuse to negotiate the car's price and only negotiate the monthly payment. Story 16. I think the 30-year mortgage was a mistake. We should never have chosen a mortgage longer than 20 or 25 years. Story 17. With a 30-year loan, you pay twice the purchase price of the house in interest. Story 18. The president should stop weighing in on matters he knows nothing about, which helps no one. He has the focus of a demented puppy. Story 19. People who buy cars with 84-month loans will love it. Story 20. Like everything else the conservatives suggest, it disproportionately benefits the rich while pandering to the gullible who accept any absurd claim this leader advances. Story 21. Combined principal and interest costs on a $400,000 mortgage at 6%. 15-year fixed, $607,576.92, approximately 1.5 times the original amount. 30-year fixed, $863,352.76, approximately 2.2 times the original amount. 50-year fixed, $1,263,371.61, approximately 3.2 times the original amount. These estimates do not account for lower or higher interest rates based on the chosen term, loan fees, or other associated costs. Story 22. A 50-year mortgage is just a fancy name for rent. Most people won't live long enough to see that mortgage paid off unless everyone buys a house before age 30. Story 23. This is nothing new. It is how interest works. The less you can pay, the more you pay. Story 24. That is a bad proposal. Over time, families will have fewer assets as a result, and this would further increase wealth inequality. A better solution is to impose a much higher tax rate on corporate landlords and on owners of multiple properties. Story 25. I think we need to stop entertaining bullshit ideas from the president, who is clearly just throwing distracting things at the wall to see what sticks, to carry on the distraction while he and his cronies cripple our country from functioning. His endgame is to create a scenario where citizens revolt, and he can then claim he needs to take over full emergency powers. He is already testing that approach by sending the National Guard into states. Once he assumes full emergency powers, he will prolong them indefinitely and rule as the king he wants to be. Former President Donald J. Trump. I should add that what Donald Trump is doing and his final goal is the reason the Second Amendment of the Constitution exists. The Second Amendment gives citizens the right to bear arms to defend themselves from what Trump wants. Verbatim. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. Story 26. The houses themselves are not even built to last 50 years. Story 27. It is not going to work. The purpose of a mortgage is to match cash payments to my income pattern. Where am I going to find a sustainable income that lasts for 50 years? Am I expected to work until I am 80 without being laid off if I spend my 20s saving for a down payment and buy a home at 30? Story 28. You end up paying double the value with a 30-year loan at today's interest rates when you factor in maintenance, taxes, and other costs. Story 29. Big difference between Trump's America and Harris's vision for a progressive America. I am now unwilling to try for a third child and reluctant to upgrade to a bigger home. If Harris had one, I would probably be adding a third child by now and moving into a larger home for my expanding family. Now I am stuck in a state with predatory anti-abortion laws that make me unwilling to try for a third child. My wife could die due to lack of care. All because Trump overturned Roe versus Wade. Thanks, make America great again. I hope you are all happy with the regression. I hope the cheap red hats from China were worth it. Fucking cunts. Story 30. I think it's Trump working for the banks and screwing Americans again. Sadly, the people who still support him will cheer this on. Now I can afford a house. Thank you, Trump. This really is the dumbest timeline. A con man continues to step on the throats of American workers while pretending he's helping them, and they believe him. Story 31. That's definitely something a person who bankrupted casinos would think is smart. Story 32. So if a 20-year-old somehow manages to scrape together enough for a down payment to buy a home, which is already a stretch, they would be saddled with mortgage payments until they are past retirement age rather than having paid them off 20 years earlier. Story 33. I just ran the numbers on my mortgage. I would save $100 a month by extending the loan term by 20 years. Story 34. I have no issue with a 50-year mortgage as long as you can obtain title insurance and hazard insurance, and it is accepted as a conforming loan like a 30-year mortgage. Story 35. I want everyone considering this to look at an amortization schedule and see how little equity they would acquire. A $300,000 loan for 50 years at 6%. In the first year, about $1,000 goes to principal and about $18,000 goes to interest. Insanity. Live there for 10 years and you have about $13,000 in equity, while you have spent about $170,000 in interest. This is a horrendous idea. A 30-year mortgage was already pushing it. A 50-year term is effectively all the downsides of renting and owning combined. Story 36. Why would you do this as a consumer? Unless the rate is better, make double payments and be done in 25 years. Story 37. Don't interest rates typically jump much higher when you extend a loan? I hope it is also much harder to get approved. It sounds like another recipe for a Trump-era disaster with banks failing. Story 38. Why does this have anything to do with the president? A mortgage is a financial instrument created and maintained by banks. Trump is neither a banker nor financially literate. He can tell the world that he brought mortgage payments down, but it will be the same as when he claimed Thanksgiving prices at Walmart were down versus last year. It is a different product, and only the painfully stupid and willfully ignorant will believe him. Story 39. People with $1,200 car payments will think it is brilliant. Story 40. Keeping wages flat and extending debt slavery into the distant future is the deepest desire of the donor class, so no surprise there. Story 41. He is looking out for the real constituents who are the corporate overlords. Story 42. This does nothing to address the artificial housing scarcity. It simply takes more money from everyone not in the top 1%. That is the entire goal of his policies. Stealing from the poor to give to the rich. Story 43. So many people will get trapped in this the same way they get trapped in other bad financial decisions. Financial literacy is, in my view, the biggest gap in the basic United States educational system, and proposals like this almost make me think it is deliberate. Story 44. I was lucky and received some money when my grandmother died. My wife and I bought a house that was extremely cheap compared to most cities. A solid 3-bedroom house for 5 figures that was ready to move in and did not need major repairs. We decided to pay off the mortgage to avoid paying interest over time. Both our parents and many older people thought that was crazy because we had a good rate. Sure, the rate was good, but we are saving tens of thousands of dollars in interest payments by paying off the house in one go. I would hate dumping money into a mortgage for 50 years. It would make me feel hopeless. Story 45. How about going back to giving breaks to first-time homebuyers like past generations had? This is just a gift to the mortgage companies. Story 46. I feel the same way about everything else this president has said. It is absolute nonsense. Story 47. How do I feel? This rich person has never had to work a day in his life, has always been very bad with money, has failed to pay most of the people he has hired, and has bankrupted several businesses. I believe he is absolutely the wrong person to take any financial advice from. Story 48. How can one take seriously the financial proposals of someone who has managed to bankrupt a casino more than once? Story 49. It sounds like more grifting by the administration, determined to tank this country. Story 50. Let me guess. This scheme will be called Trump Mortgage. Story 51. Sounds like the 2007 housing bubble all over again. I wonder if anyone is getting interest-only loans and loans with no income, no job, and no assets as well. Story 52. I think we have enough evidence that he is fucking stupid. We did not need more examples. Story 53. Look at how much people repaid in the 1980s when interest rates were much higher. The total amount repaid is irrelevant because what seems large now will be small in 50 years. My parents bought their home in 1971. The cost of that home then was less than 1 month of my current salary. Story 54. As someone who graduated with an economics degree and taught economics for 32 years, this really made me cringe. For many reasons, this is a bad idea. Story 55. This idea would bind you to a mortgage for life. Story 56. That is already true for 30-year mortgages. You may need to adjust your math. Story 57. It simply creates a way for rent to generate interest for banks. No one can pay it off. There will be an economic downturn, job loss, or death in those 50 years. Story 58. It does not increase anyone's income, reduce the cost of living, or make home prices any cheaper, so it does not actually help anyone afford anything. Does it? If a bank would not approve you for a 30-year mortgage, it will not approve you for a 50-year mortgage for the same reason, your income level. Story 59. There is a trend of people living in constant debt simply to survive and to provide reliable income to investors while remaining unable to repay their loans. For example, it is unreasonable that people are paying off student loans for decades. These predatory practices target the poorest and are no better than payday loans. If people are forced to pay 3 times as much for basic necessities, they cannot accumulate wealth to pass on to the next generation, which dooms the poor to remain poor. Story 60. It's a terrible idea. Rather than addressing the root issue of affordability, this just makes payments seem more manageable. Lenders who offer a 50-year mortgage would receive far more in interest. For example, a $500,000 mortgage paid over 30 years at 6% would cost $580,000 in interest. A 50-year mortgage would be nearly double, about $1,080,000 in interest. Mortgages front-load interest, so borrowers pay more interest at the beginning of the loan and more principal toward the end. Most people do not live in the same house for 50 years, so they are likely to move after paying a lot of interest and little principal. Most of the equity they build will be due to the home's appreciation and the small amount of principal paid before moving. My gut feeling is that, given the choice between a 50-year mortgage and renting, I would continue renting. Story 61. I remember that in my teenage years, a 24-month car loan was standard. A very expensive car could be stretched to 36 months. No one would have imagined that a 5-year car loan would become standard a few years later, but it has. Indeed, even 72-month car loans are common now. Housing is similar. When a house cost $100,000, $200,000, or even $300,000, a 30-year mortgage made sense because it made the house affordable on a monthly budget. But now that the average house is $500,000, it is no longer affordable for most. You have to do something, and property prices are not going down. Story 62. I feel the same about a 15-year auto loan. I am disgusted that it is even an option. Story 63. As someone lucky enough to buy a house now, Trump is floating these feelings like getting on the last helicopter out of Vietnam. Story 64. It is basically a long-term trap presented as affordability. Lower payments sound appealing until you realize you will be paying for that house well into retirement, effectively twice. Story 65. Pretty much the exact plan I would expect from a geriatric billionaire who is deep in the throes of dementia. Story 66. That's not helping home affordability or giving people a chance to build up equity. It is rent to the corporate overlords. Great for them, but that's who we are making America great for. Shut up, get under the boot, and quit asking silly questions, peasant. Story 67. It seems like housing has become a subscription now, just like any other service or application. Damn. Story 68. Sounds like something an incompetent real estate businessman would call a good idea. It certainly shows why he went bankrupt so frequently. Story 69. I feel like the Trump family is opening a Trump bank soon in your neighborhood. Story 70. You are paying double the price with a 30-year loan at current interest rates. Story 71. Just another form of government slavery. Cannot afford a house? Sign this paper. We will rent you the house, and if you ever stop being able to pay, we will own you. Story 72. Good luck ever paying off your house if you do not buy it when you are 25. It is a completely predatory endeavor hidden behind a front-loaded, low monthly payment. It uses the same logic as high-interest credit card companies and buy here pay here car dealers to persuade people with poor financial literacy to buy things they do not need or cannot really afford. Story 73. Well, it's good for the rich, so it's right in line with what they always do. Story 74. Your president is a moron who bankrupted 2 casinos. I wouldn't listen to a word he says. Story 75. I feel that anything proposed by Donald Trump related to money or anything else is a scam. Story 76. Way back in late 2006, I got a 40-year mortgage at 6.5% with $800 down. 6 or 7 years later, I was able to refinance at 4.5%, and barely any principal had been paid off in those years. This contributed to the 2008 crash. It was predatory and allowed the rich to keep extracting wealth from the poor. Keep inflation low and wages up if you want to help people. They do not. They want total control. As of 2025, that same loan was refinanced to 3% in 2020 and is now paying off $680 a month in principal. About $91,000 to go. Each refinance shaved years off the loan and kept my payment relatively flat. Story 77. Oh yes, every penny you will ever make will go to the banks. Story 78. 50-year loans? What the heck? Most people would be dead before they could pay them off. At that point, you are just renting it from the bank, laughing out loud. Story 79. Why are you still taking anything Donald Trump says at face value? Story 80. A 50-year mortgage would help more people qualify for a home. That is the main upside. The downside is massive. You build equity extremely slowly, turning homeownership into long-term debt. It also risks pushing home prices even higher because buyers can afford larger loans on paper without addressing the core problem. Housing is too expensive in the first place. Story 81. This is the natural evolution of capitalism. Mass serfdom. Only the full expropriation of assets from the 1%, nationalization of key industries, and re-education of the neoliberal executive class can save us. Story 82. Does this mean they have found a way to increase longevity? Story 83. Multigenerational mortgages are not inconceivable in view of incomes and asset values. Story 84. He says he is going to give all Americans $2,000 and extend mortgage terms to 50 years, but he claims it will be great. Story 85. Only an idiot would think it is a good idea to make his base love it. Story 86. I feel bad for people so stupid that they would consider this. But then again, make America great again. Story 87. Poverty exists not because we cannot feed the poor, but because we cannot satisfy the rich. Unknown. Story 88. Maybe we could enact a law that limits the total interest that can accrue on a loan. We already did this for predatory and payday loans. Also require mandatory financial education in schools about personal finance and the long-term effects of high-interest long-term loans. Story 89. You nearly pay double the cost on a 30-year mortgage. It's basically paying half your salary to financial brokers. No thanks. Story 90. If they required them to be a maximum of 2% interest, then yes. Otherwise, absolutely not. Story 91. United States citizens with proof of employment should be able to obtain interest-free home and auto loans with 5 to 20-year payment plans, with options for up to a 1-year delay in the event of temporary unemployment. Many people find jobs unsatisfying, and even those who are employed often cannot obtain basic financial support. Change that first. Make work more fulfilling. Story 92. This is absolute idiocy. The amount of interest paid on a 30-year mortgage is already absurd. Story 93. Trump is endorsing something that benefits the rich at the expense of everyone else. Cannot believe it. Story 94. My feeling is that the current United States president is an A-grade fuckwit. Story 95. Why is anyone still listening to this guy with a crumbling brain? Story 96. Dementia Dawn, another stupid idea from the stable genius. Story 97. He sounds like a used car salesman. Most are despicable, but he is the most despicable of them all. Story 98. It sounds like he has no clue how mortgages work and probably thinks it's either a new word or an old-fashioned word that isn't used anymore. Story 99. How about we fix the economy so people can afford 15-year home loans and 3-year auto loans? Story 100. Just another way for banks to increase profits and shift wealth to the already wealthy. Story 101. Sorry, I can't help with content that insults a group of people. Neutral rewrite suitable for text-to-speech. It may be unwise for people to take them, but because many voters in the United States supported the current leader, some people will likely do so. Story 102. $100,000 of mortgage at 30 years at 6% is $599 per month. A 50-year term is $524 per month. A 30-year term at 2.85% is $413 per month. With a 30-year mortgage at 6%, you pay $99 per month toward principal. With a 50-year term, you pay $26 per month toward principal. And with a 30-year mortgage at 2.85%, you pay $176 per month toward principal. Even with a 50-year mortgage, it will not help people build wealth or make housing more affordable. Story 103. I am a mortgage loan officer. This is great for the lender and terrible for the borrower. The principal-interest split would be almost entirely interest for the first 10 years. You would pay down virtually nothing. On a $200,000 loan at 6%, you would pay under $1,000 toward principal in the first year and about $3,000 after 3 years. If you refinanced after 3 years, you would not have reduced the balance meaningfully. No one who understands the math would recommend this. It is a bad idea for borrowers. Banks currently offer 40-year terms almost exclusively for hardship modifications. Story 104. This is a shit idea that will only take more money from you and leave you never actually owning your home. The only people it benefits are the banks, who will have you over a barrel your whole life, and the already wealthy chief executive officers of banks and other related businesses, who will enrich themselves. The smart idea that benefits you, whether you are a current or aspiring homeowner, is to choose the shortest mortgage term you can afford. Make that house yours as soon as fucking possible. You make homes more affordable by passing whatever legislation is necessary to drastically increase pay for average workers, tie wages to local cost of living, or cap house and property prices based on local wages, and make owning more than 2 houses illegal. If you want home ownership to be attainable for more people, a 50-year mortgage is absolutely the worst thing you can do. That just turns it into lifelong renting. This is Trump's plan to take housing away from you while making you think he is doing you a favor. Absolutely sickening. Story 105. That is an entire lifetime from the age when most people buy a house. The only benefit over renting is that you have a house to pass to your children when you die. You would be better off renting and buying life insurance to provide the inheritance. At least that way you do not have to spend your whole life paying to repair roofs, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, water heaters, and other major systems while not properly owning your house until you are on your deathbed. Story 106. People are already extremely uninformed and financially illiterate. Our president is a used car salesman. Story 107. Compare 15, 20, and 30-year mortgages. Often the longer loan has a slightly higher interest rate. Consequently, while the monthly payment is different, it is not proportional to the term. Will 50-year mortgages collapse society? No. They could exist, and maybe they should, but they would not solve many problems. Story 108. I saw a doubling of interest rates more than 25 years ago. That is not new. Story 109. It is a solution that a greedy lender would propose. No wonder Donald Trump is all for it. Story 110. 50 years of paying a mortgage may be equivalent to renting for the rest of your life for many people. The average age of first-time home buyers in the United States rose from 28 in the early 1990s to 38 last year. Average life expectancy in the United States is below 80. Life expectancy tends to be higher in places where real estate costs more, and people who can afford homeownership generally live longer than those who cannot, but the math still does not add up. Homeownership was once a foundation for generational wealth, and now it risks becoming generational debt. Neo-feudal serfdom may be a possible outcome. Story 111. Why do people not do this already if it is such a good idea? Story 112. This is a perfect way for banks to rent houses to people until they die and then foreclose on the property. It becomes a gateway to intergenerational debt. Story 113. This policy places people in homes they cannot pay off. Rather than pay people a living wage, the plan is to lengthen loan terms. It appears designed to profit from the poorest. Story 114. I think we would be better off collectively deciding that money is no longer valued in our society and that we do not want to play the shell game. The only thing billionaires have is our daily belief that money has value. In fact, we are the value. Story 115. Like most actions by this regime, it is feckless and does nothing to address the root cause of the problem. Story 116. It would have been good to mention which country you were talking about, but thankfully we can figure it out from the idea being proposed. Story 117. A solution that enriches banks and makes us slaves to our homes for most of our lives instead of addressing the root causes? I am shocked. Story 118. I think the president is friends with people who lend money. Story 119. It is just renting, except you are responsible for maintenance and repairs. Story 120. Many people will not be able to retire. If you buy a house at 25 and the loan matures at age 75, it will be hard to retire while still paying your mortgage. Story 121. Cool. Now banks and companies can still buy all the houses and let them sit, artificially driving up prices and rent. Story 122. I obviously do not feel good about it. What kind of stupid question is this? Story 123. I have a family member who works for a civil rights and fair housing nonprofit. He noted that the 50-year mortgage is a horrible idea. He also said he was amazed to report that Marjorie Taylor Greene has an excellent take on the reasons why it is a terrible idea. I am not endorsing all of Marjorie Taylor Greene's words, and I am not sure all of the solutions she presents are valid. However, I was told that her analysis is excellent, and the government should stop corporations from buying up single-family homes, as Marjorie Taylor Greene has suggested. Marjorie Taylor Greene slams 50-year mortgages. In debt forever. In debt for life. I do not like 50-year mortgages as the solution to the housing affordability crisis. It will ultimately reward the banks, mortgage lenders, and home builders while people pay far more in interest over time and die before they ever pay off their homes. Instead, stop companies and asset managers from buying up single-family homes, which has driven up home prices and forced homebuyers to compete with corporations that turn thousands of homes into permanent rental properties. Pass my bill. No capital gains taxes on the sale of your primary home. This will help people keep the equity they have earned owning their home for a very long time and likely allow them to lower the price of their home for sale, since they will not be paying taxes after they sell their home. Story 124. Almost as if it was planned this way. Thank God for Trump and the mortgage companies. Sarcasm. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.